Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today is Saturday, February 7th, 2026.
It is hard to believe we are already almost 2 months into the new year.
I know, it feels like the decade is just evaporating. But today, I want to hit the pause button. We are going to stop the clock and take a really comprehensive, rigorous look at the landscape of medical AI as it stands right now, here in early 2026.
It feels like the perfect time to do it. The dust has, settled a bit.
That is exactly what I was thinking, because if you look back just a few years, rewind the tape to the early 2020s, say 2023 or 2024, it was loud.
It was all hype cycles.
All hype cycles. It was chatbots writing funny limericks or drafting a generic email to your boss. Everyone was freaking out, but it felt a little bit like a parlor trick.
It was the novelty phase. We were all just, poking the bear to see what it would do.
Right. But now it feels different. The landscape today in 2026 is something much more tangible. It is complex, it is high stakes, and frankly, the more I read through the stack of research we have today, the more I realize it's actually mind-blowing in a way that chatbots never were.
I think that's a great way to put it. We've moved from the wow phase to the how phase. And the how is where things get difficult, but also where they get truly revolutionary.
We aren't talking about party tricks anymore. We are talking about Nobel Prizes. We are talking about the FDA creating entirely new regulatory lanes for software that literally shapeshifts while you use it.
And we're talking about AI models that might actually know more about your biological age, how close you are to the end, really, than your family doctor does.
That is the reality we are living in. It's not speculative fiction anymore.
Not at all.
So, here is our mission for this deep dive. We have a massive stack of reports here. I've got the latest State of Clinical AI report from Stanford and Harvard. I've got market analysis from Bessemer Venture Partners that explains where the money is going. We have technical deep dives on model evaluation from JMIR AI and insights on the device market.
A pretty comprehensive stack.
And we are going to synthesize all of this to answer one big looming question. Is AI actually saving lives in 2026, or is it just really, really good at passing medical exams?
It's the classic distinction between performance and utility, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you look at the sources we have today, they reveal this fascinating tension.
A tension, how so?
Well, on one hand, you have these superhuman benchmark scores where models are acing tests that would stump a third-year resident. But on the other hand, you have the messy, chaotic reality of clinical workflows, regulatory hurdles, and, the pure economics of healthcare.
The how is always messier than the wow.
Always. And usually a lot more expensive.
Well, let's start with the science. Before we get to the hospitals and the stock market, we have to talk about the bedrock, the scientific breakthrough that enabled so much of what we are seeing today. I want to start with the Nobel Prize.
The 2024 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. It feels like a while ago, but it's foundational to everything else we're discussing.
Right. It went to Demis Hassabis and John Jumper of Google DeepMind alongside David Baker. And this wasn't for a chatbot that can write a cover letter. This was for AlphaFold.
It's almost impossible to overstate this. To understand why this is such a big deal, you have to understand that they didn't just write a good software paper. They solved a grand challenge of biology that had stumped scientists for 50 years.
The protein folding problem.
The protein folding problem.
Right, let's unpack this for a second, because protein folding sounds like something that happens at a laundromat. But it's the basis of life, right?
It is the basis of everything biological.
Right.
I mean, proteins are the little machines of the body. You have hemoglobin moving oxygen, insulin regulating sugar, antibodies fighting viruses. They are all proteins.
And a protein is just a long chain of amino acids.
Exactly. Think of it like beads on a string. But here's the catch. For that string of beads to actually do anything, it has to fold up into a very specific, incredibly complex, three-dimensional shape. If it folds wrong, it doesn't work.
Or worse.
Or much worse. It can cause diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or cystic fibrosis.
So the shape is the function.
The shape is the function. Precisely. And for decades, we had this paradox. It's called Levinthal's paradox.
Levinthal's paradox sounds like a Robert Ludlum novel. What is it?
So back in 1969, a molecular biologist named Cyrus Levinthal pointed out something kind of terrifying. A typical protein has so many possible configurations, so many ways it could fold, that if it tried them one by one to find the right shape,
it would take a long time.
It would take longer than the age of the known universe to finish.
Longer than the age of the universe. For one protein.
Much, much longer. And yet, in your body, right now, as we're talking, proteins are folding correctly in milliseconds.
So nature has a shortcut, a massive shortcut.
Nature has a shortcut. And for 50 years, The brightest minds in science were trying to figure out the math behind that shortcut. Because if we wanted to know what a protein looked like, we had to use these incredibly slow, expensive experimental methods.
Like X-ray crystallography.
That's the main one. You basically have to crystallize the protein, which is a whole art form in itself, then blast it with X-rays and look at the diffraction pattern. It could take a PhD student their entire academic career, 4 or 5 years, to map a single protein.
A whole PhD for one shape.
For one shape.
And AlphaFold changed that.
It did just change it. It evaporated the problem. If we look at the evolution here, it's a masterclass in AI development. AlphaFold 1 came out in 2018. It placed first in the CASP-13 competition.
CASP, that's the critical assessment of structure prediction, the Olympics of protein folding.
That's the one. Every 2 years, they give teams a list of amino acid sequences for proteins where the shape is known but hasn't been published yet. So you can't cheat.
And AlphaFold 1 did well.
It did very well. It was a step change, using deep learning to estimate distances between the amino acid residues. It was good, a huge leap, but it wasn't solved.
But the real earthquake, the one that got everyone's attention, was AlphaFold 2 in 2020.
That was the singularity moment for biology. In the CASP-14 competition, AlphaFold 2 scored a 92.4 on something called a global distance test.
Okay, contextualize that for me. Is that like an A-? What does 92.4 mean?
In this context, anything above 90 is considered comparable to experimental results. It means the difference between the AI's prediction and the physical X-ray result is roughly the width of a single atom.
The width of an atom.
It is, for all practical purposes, perfect. It solved the problem.
How did it make that jump? What changed under the hood between version 1 and version 2?
It used an attention mechanism. You know how large language models pay attention to different words in a sentence to understand context?
Right, to know which it refers to in a long paragraph.
Yep. Exactly. AlphaFold 2 did that with amino acids. Think of it like a person assembling a jigsaw puzzle. You don't just look at 2 pieces next to each other. You look at the whole picture, connecting pieces in small clumps and then joining the clumps. It sees the global structure, not just the local one.
And it was trained on a massive database.
It was trained on the Big Fantastic Database.
I love that they actually called it that, the Big Fantastic Database. It sounds like something from a children's book.
It does, but it was a database of about 65 million protein sequences. It learned the grammar of life. It learned the rules of that shortcut nature uses.
And the impact has been staggering. But we are in 2026 now. AlphaFold 2 is, old news in this space. We have AlphaFold 3.
Correct. AlphaFold 3 is the current state of the art. And the big leap here is complexity. AlphaFold 2 was great at predicting a single protein chain. But proteins don't work alone. They bind to DNA, they bind to RNA, they bind to small molecules called ligands.
So AlphaFold 3 can predict the whole team, not just the star player.
Exactly. It can predict the structure of these massive interacting complexes. And technically, it operates differently. It uses something called a pairformer architecture and, more importantly, a diffusion model.
Whoa, slow down. You just threw 2 heavy technical terms at me? Pairformer and diffusion. Let's start with diffusion. I know that from AI art generators, like typing an astronaut riding a horse on the moon into Midjourney, and it appears out of static.
It is exactly that principle.
It's doing that for proteins.
It is. Imagine a cloud of noise, just random atom positions floating in space. The model slowly denoises that cloud. It shifts the atoms little by little, step by step, over hundreds of iterations until a sharp, physically plausible structure emerges.
So it isn't looking up a shape in a library. It is effectively hallucinating a scientifically accurate reality from pure chaos.
In a highly constrained mathematical way, yes. It's dreaming up biology based on the fundamental rules it has learned.
That is wild. So what does this all mean for the field? Why does the Nobel Committee care so much?
It means we now have the biology source code. The AlphaFold protein structure database now contains over 200 million protein structures. That is nearly every known protein on the planet.
200 million. I'm trying to wrap my head around that scale. If I printed that out, effectively, DeepMind just handed us the blueprints to life on Earth. Did they just give it away?
For the most part, yes. It is an open database.
Right.
Researchers all over the world can access it, and it is the foundation for modern drug discovery. If you know the shape of the lock, the protein involved in a disease, you could design the key, the drug much faster.
We were throwing keys at the door in the dark before.
And now the lights are on. You can see the keyhole.
But playing devil's advocate here, Is it perfect? The Wikipedia source we have points out some limitations.
Right. It is not magic. It has two main limitations. First, AlphaFold creates static images. It gives you a snapshot,
A photograph.
a perfect photograph. But proteins are dynamic. They wiggle, they vibrate, they change shape when they do their job. AlphaFold gives you the statue, not the dancer. And second, it struggles with orphan proteins.
Orphan proteins.
Proteins that are so weird, so evolutionarily distinct, they don't have any cousins in that big, fantastic database to learn from.
So if it hasn't seen anything like it before, it gets confused.
Exactly. It's an amazing extrapolator, but it's not creating new physics from scratch.
Okay, so that's the biology sorted, or at least massively accelerated. We understand the building blocks. Now let's move from the lab to the hospital. We have this new report from Stanford and Harvard, The State of Clinical AI 2026. And honestly, reading this felt like a bucket of ice water after the warm, fuzzy feelings of the Nobel Prize.
It is a crucial reality check. The lab is a controlled, pristine environment. The hospital is a war zone.
The report talks about this superhuman illusion. We keep hearing about models passing the USMLE, the medical licensing exam, and matching physicians on fixed cases. We see the headlines, AI beats doctors. But the report says that's not the whole story.
It is definitely not. There's a fascinating study mentioned in the report. I think you spent a minute on it. The none of the above test.
I loved this detail. It's such a simple but clever way to trip up a genius machine. Tell us about that.
So, researchers took standard medical multiple-choice questions. These are the vignettes. A 45-year-old male comes in with chest pain, history of smoking, etc. What is the likely diagnosis? And the options are A, B, C, or D.
And the AI usually aces these because it has seen thousands of them. It recognizes the pattern. Smoking plus chest pain plus age probably equals heart attack.
Exactly. It's a high-level pattern-matching game. But then, the researchers did something sneaky. They modified the questions. They took out the correct answer from the list of options, and they added a new option. E, none of the above.
Which forces you to actually think, right, you have to look at the list and say, no, it's not A, no, it's not B, no, it's not C. You can't just pick the most likely pattern.
Correct. It requires negation and exclusion. These are core logical steps in diagnostic reasoning. The clinical information hasn't changed. If the answer isn't there, a good clinician should know it isn't there.
So what happened to the AI?
Its accuracy dropped sharply by more than a third. It started confidently picking the next most likely wrong answer instead of recognizing that the right answer was missing.
Ouch. So it's like a student who memorized the textbook, but panics when the question is phrased differently on the exam.
It suggests the models are relying on probability and association, not necessarily deep diagnostic reasoning. They are guessing based on the vibe of the words, rather than understanding the underlying physiology.
Which is a huge problem in the real world.
It's the whole problem. Because patients don't come in with a multiple-choice question on their forehead. They come in saying, I feel weird, and then they forget to tell you they took aspirin an hour ago, or that their uncle had a similar thing.
The messiness of real life.
Exactly. The report found that when models have to ask follow-up questions or manage incomplete info, which is basically every day in a hospital performance, just plummets. And worse, the models tend to be overconfident.
What do you mean by overconfident?
A human doctor might say, well, it could be a few things. I'm not sure. Let's run a test. The AI often says it is definitively X with 98% confidence, even when it's dead wrong.
And that's dangerous.
That's incredibly dangerous.
So if the messiness of real life trips them up and they fail when we change the phrasing, that raises a massive question about the tools we are using. But the report wasn't all bad news. It highlighted where AI is actually winning, and the winner seems to be prediction.
Yes, this is a key distinction. AI excels where humans are limited by scale, not judgment. Humans are bad at staring at spreadsheets of numbers for 12 hours and spotting a subtle, multivariable trend. AI loves that.
There's a specific hospital study cited, I think it was about ICU transfers.
Right. This study showed an AI model predicting patient deterioration, things like needing an ICU transfer or going into cardiac arrest 8 to 24 hours before the standard alerts.
That is huge. 8 hours is a lifetime in a critical care setting.
It is the difference between a controlled, proactive transfer and a frantic code blue emergency. The AI was looking at dozens of streams of vitals, heart rate variability, respiration patterns, blood pressure trends, and spotting these very subtle patterns of instability that a nurse who has 5 other patients and is running around all day might miss until the big alarm goes off.
And another example was predicting a biological age from health records. That sounds a bit like science fiction.
It does, but it's very real. We all have a chronological age, the date on your birth certificate. But your biological age is how fast your systems are actually aging internally. It's a measure of wear and tear.
So I could be 40 chronologically, but my body could be functioning like a 55-year-old's.
Or 30-year-olds. The AI analyzed millions of electronic health records, lab results, medications, diagnoses, and it learned to calculate this biological age. And this AI-derived number proved to be more accurate for predicting mortality than any traditional risk factor.
So it can look at my blood work and say, you're 40, but your organs are 55. We need to intervene.
Basically, it sees the accumulation of damage that we can't quantify easily with our own brains.
The report also talks about human AI teaming. The idea that the AI isn't the doctor, but the teammate.
And we have good evidence that this works, but it requires a very specific dynamic. There was a study from Germany where radiologists using an AI assistant detected more breast cancers on mammograms than radiologists alone. The AI was like a second set of eyes that never got tired.
So it's an augmentation tool.
Exactly. And in Kenya, a partnership with OpenAI used a background AI system to review urgent care visits. It would flag potential errors or misdiagnoses for a human doctor to review, and it significantly reduced errors.
But there's a risk there too, right?
Yeah.
The report calls it automation bias. I feel like I do this with my GPS. If the GPS says turn left, I turn left, even if I can clearly see a road closed sign with my own eyes.
That is a perfect analogy, and it is exactly what happens in the clinic. Automation bias is when a clinician follows incorrect AI advice, deferring their own judgment to the machine.
And the studies showed this can be really bad.
The studies show that this can lead to worse decisions than if they used no AI at all.
Wait, say that again? Using the AI made them worse than just being a doctor.
In cases where the AI was confidently wrong, yes. Because it takes a massive amount of cognitive confidence for a human to look at a computer screen that says, diagnosis X, 99% confidence, and say, no, I think you're wrong. Especially if that human is a junior resident, or it's 3 a.m., or they're overworked.
It creates a psychological crutch. You just start to trust it.
You do. And that is the danger zone we're in right now. Finding the balance between helpful augmentation and dangerous over-reliance.
Which brings us perfectly to the battle of the models debate. If we are going to use these tools, and we know they have these biases, what kind of tools should they be? Do we need a genius generalist or a savant specialist?
This is section 3 of our deep dive, the battle of the models. And it's a huge debate right now.
We have this framework from a publication called JMR AI, the Clever Framework, and it looked at a really specific comparison. GPT-4o, which is the massive general-purpose brain we all know.
The one that can write poetry, code in Python, and plan your vacation to Italy. The jack of all trades.
Versus a company called John Snow Labs' MEDS model, which is a small medical model with only 8 billion parameter.
Only 8 billion. It sounds funny to call that small, but compared to the trillions of parameters in the big generalist models, it is tiny. It's like comparing a specialized surgical tool to a Swiss Army knife.
But here is the catchphrase moment. Size isn't everything.
I knew you were going to say that. But in this case, the data absolutely backs you up.
The study was blinded, right? The doctors didn't know which AI was which.
Yes, that's critical. Medical doctors reviewed the answer to clinical questions without knowing which AI wrote them, and they preferred the small, specialized model meds over the giant GPT-4o by significant margins.
How significant?
Depending on the metric, anywhere from 45% to 92% more often, it was a blowout.
That is a blowout. That isn't a margin of error. That is a domination. So why? What did the little guy do so much better?
3 things: factuality, clinical relevance, and conciseness. The specialized model, because it was fine-tuned only on vetted medical data, hallucinated less. It just made up fewer facts. That's a huge one.
Obviously.
But the other big one was conciseness.
Because doctors are busy. They don't have time for a story.
Exactly. GPT-4o, because it is trained on the whole internet, tends to be chatty. It writes 3 paragraphs of preamble. As a large language model, it is important to consider. In the complex context of this patient's presentation, the doctor just wants the answer. MEDS was trained to think like a doctor, so it gets straight to the point.
The Clever study also highlighted what it called a dirty secret of benchmarks. We touched on this with the none of the above test, but it goes deeper. It's this idea of data contamination.
This is the elephant in the room for all AI evaluation, especially in medicine.
It's basically cheating, isn't it?
It's unintentional cheating. But yes, the effect is the same. Many of these models have likely seen the test questions, like the USMLE questions, during their training. The questions are all over the internet in study guides. The model scrapes the internet.
So when you test it, it's not solving the problem, it's just remembering the answer it saw online.
Right, it's like giving a student the answer key the night before the exam, and then being surprised when they get an A. It doesn't prove they learned anything.
So how did the clever study get around that?
They did something very smart and very difficult. They created 500 novel clinical cases from scratch. They had physicians write them de novo to ensure the models had absolutely never seen them before. That is the only way to get a fair, true test of reasoning ability.
And when they did that, the specialized model won.
It won because it was actually reasoning based on medical principles, while the generalist was trying to pattern match a pattern it had never seen before, and it failed.
Let's look at the lay of the land for 2025 and into 2026. We have a power ranking from a site called Dito7.ai, who is on top of the mountain right now.
It's a crowded mountain. OpenAI's newest model, O1, is being touted as the accuracy king. It scored an incredible 96.9% on the MediQA benchmark.
That is incredibly high,
Okay.
but there's always a but.
There is. But it's expensive to run and it's slow. These powerful reasoning models take time to think. In a busy emergency room, you don't have 60 seconds to wait for an API response.
And there was a more serious flaw mentioned.
A very serious one. Dikdar7.ai pointed out a critical flaw. Its performance drops significantly when faced with racially biased questions. That's a massive red flag for health equity. If the model performs differently based on the demographics in the question, that's incredibly dangerous.
It means it's just reflecting and amplifying the biases in its training data.
Absolutely. Then you have a model called DeepSeek R1. This is an interesting one. They call this the JARVIS moment.
JARVIS from Iron Man, Tony Stark's AI assistant.
Yes, because it's open source, and it integrates well into existing hospital IT systems. But its killer feature is translation.
Translation like English to Spanish.
Not just that, translation from doctor to patient.
Oh, I need that. We all need that.
We all do. Think about the last time you got a lab report back. It says something like, elevated creatinine levels indicating potential renal insufficiency. That's terrifying, right?
I'd assume I was dying. I'd go straight to Google and convince myself I had hours to live.
Exactly. DeepSeek R1 is designed to take that medical jargon and translate it into plain, understandable English. It would say, your kidney function is a little lower than ideal. This can be caused by dehydration. We recommend drinking more water, and we'll recheck this in a few weeks.
That is the JARVIS moment, taking the terrifying and making it actionable. That's genuinely useful.
It's a huge quality of life improvement.
What about the empathy side? The bedside manner?
That is where Hippocratic AI comes in with their Polaris 3.0 model. They are taking a safety-first approach. This is a massive suite 4.2 trillion parameters designed specifically for patient interaction. They focused on teaching it bedside manner, empathy, and safety protocols.
So that's the one you want talking to grandma to remind her to take her pills.
Ideally. It's designed not to just be right, but to be kind and reassuring. And of course, we can't forget Google. MedPal M2 and now Gemini 2.0, they are the pioneers here. The big push with Gemini is making it truly multimodal.
Meaning it can process more than just text.
Right. You can look at an X-ray, listen to an audio recording of a patient's cough, and read the doctor's notes all at the same time to come to a diagnosis. It's combining the senses just like a human doctor does.
But even with all this power, the hallucination problem hasn't gone away completely, has it? These things still just make stuff up.
No, it hasn't gone away. Zipu AI's GLM4 model had a very low hallucination rate, about 1.3%, which sounds great. But in medicine, a 1% error rate is terrifying.
It's the difference between a typo in an email and a typo in a chemotherapy dosage.
Precisely. If Gmail hallucinates and adds a weird sentence to your email, it's funny. If a medical AI hallucinates and invents a lab value or a non-existent clinical trial, someone could get seriously hurt.
Okay, let's follow the money. We've talked science and clinical practice. Now let's talk business. We have the State of Health AI 2026 report from Bessemer Venture Partners.
This gives us the financial pulse of the industry. And the main headline is that the market is recovering.
Recovering from the crash.
Yes. Do you remember Health Tech 1.0? The boom during the pandemic?
Oh, yeah. Teladoc, Peloton, everything related to digital health was going to the moon.
And then it all came crashing back to earth in 2022. That was Health Tech 1.0. It was all about growth at all costs, user acquisition, burning cash. Now we are in Health Tech 2.0.
What's the difference? What defines 2.0?
Profitability. The company's emerging now. The report mentions Waystar, Tempus, Hinge Health. They're profitable or have a very clear path to it. They aren't just burning venture capital to acquire users. They have sustainable business models.
But the report mentions a trust gap. Investors are still nervous.
Investors were badly burned in 2021. So even though these new health tech 2.0 companies are performing well, they are trading at a discount compared to pure software as a service companies. Wall Street is still saying, prove it. Show us this is real and not another bubble.
Bessemer has this concept they call the Health AI X Factor. What is that? What are they looking for?
It's a framework for identifying the supernova companies, the ones that will truly break out. They break it down into 4 pillars, but I want to focus on the one that I think is the most transformative. Software-like margins.
Wait, explain that. Healthcare is a services business. Services usually have low margins because you have to pay people. Software has high margins because you just copy the code.
Exactly. Traditionally, healthcare is a service business. If you want to see more patients, you need to hire more doctors and nurses. Your costs scale linearly with your revenue. Your margins are capped at maybe 30% or 40%.
Okay, that makes sense.
But Bessemer is seeing the emergence of what they call AI service as software. Companies are using AI to automate the service delivery so completely that the business starts to look like a software company on the balance sheet.
So automating the service to get the margins of software.
Achieving 70–80% gross margins by automating tasks that used to require armies of humans. Take medical billing, for example. It used to take a call center with 1,000 people to fight with insurance companies over claims.
A miserable job for everyone involved.
A miserable low-margin job. Now you have a server farm and 10 supervisors. The AI fights the insurance company AI. The margin profile shifts from a service company to a software company. That is the X factor.
Speaking of fighting insurance companies, the report had some bold predictions for 2026. One that stood out to me was about the payers, the insurance companies themselves.
Payers playing catch-up. This is an absolute arms race happening right now behind the scenes. Over the last 2 years, providers, hospitals, and clinics started using AI to get better at billing to make sure they capture every single code to get the maximum possible payout from insurers.
So the hospitals got better lawyers, effectively. Digital lawyers.
You could say that. And now the insurers are forced to use AI to review those claims because human auditors can't possibly keep up with the volume and complexity of AI-generated bills. It's AI versus AI in the administrative back office of healthcare.
I can just imagine 2 servers arguing over a billing code in the cloud at the speed of light.
That is literally what is happening, and the human is just there to sign off on the check at the end.
Another prediction was about cash pay consumers. This feels like a major shift in power.
This is fascinating. We're seeing patients starting to bypass insurance entirely and paying out of pocket for AI second opinions.
There was a study from RadNet about mammograms, right? This was a great example.
A perfect example. This company, RadNet, offered women the option to pay $40 out of pocket for an AI-enhanced reading of their mammogram, in addition to the standard human radiologist reading.
$40! That's the price of a fancy lunch.
And the study they published showed a 43% higher cancer detection rate for the group that got the AI-enhanced reading.
For $40, that seems like a complete no-brainer. Who wouldn't pay that?
Exactly. It creates a consumer-driven market. If the AI is demonstrably better, people will pay for it, regardless of what their insurance plan says. It undermines the traditional gatekeeper model of insurance.
And the third prediction was about digital CROs.
Contract research organizations. This connects all the way back to AlphaFold. We are moving toward in silico testing.
Computer testing instead of animal testing for new drugs.
Exactly. The FDA now has an official roadmap supporting this. We could see a massive shift where drug discovery is reshored from places like China back to the U.S.
Why would it come back to the U.S.?
Because for years, we outsourced a lot of that early-stage research to China for cheap labor in wet labs. You know, armies of people doing pipetting and running experiments. But if the testing moves to in silico, it's no longer about cheap labor. It's about raw compute power. It's about who has the NVIDIA H100 chips. And right now, that is overwhelmingly the U.S.
That's a massive geopolitical shift driven entirely by AI.
Absolutely. It turns biology into an information technology problem, and the U.S. is very good at those.
Speaking of the FDA, let's talk regulation. We have insights here from JAMA Software on the FDA's new playbook for AI.
The central challenge of the FDA has always been this. How do you regulate software that learns and changes over time? If I approve a pacemaker's algorithm today and it learns from new data and changes its algorithm by tomorrow, is it still the same approved device?
It's like approving a car that might spontaneously decide to turn itself into a truck next week.
Exactly. The old model was static. You lock the code, you test it, you get it approved. If you want to change one single line of code, you have to start the whole process over. That completely kills AI development, which is all about iteration.
So what did they do? How did they solve that?
They introduced the TPLC approach, Total Product Lifecycle. It's about continuous monitoring. But the key mechanism, the really clever part, is the PCCP.
The Predetermined Change Control Plan.
Think of it like a prenup for AI. When the manufacturer submits the AI for approval, they also submit this plan. They tell the FDA up front, here is how our algorithm is going to change. Here are the types of data it will learn from. Here are the boundaries. It can learn this much, but not that much. And here is how we will monitor it to make sure it stays safe.
So they don't have to go back to the FDA for every single little software update.
Correct. As long as the AI's evolution stays within the prenup agreement, they can iterate and improve it. It allows for that rapid iteration that tech needs without sacrificing safety oversight. It's a really forward-thinking piece of policy.
And this is governing a booming market. Global Market Insight says the smart medical devices market is just exploding.
It was $61.6 billion in 2025, and it's heading toward nearly $200 billion by the end of the decade.
And the big trend driving that is hospital at home.
Moving care from the clinic to the living room. We're seeing continuous glucose monitors, or CGMs, becoming standard not just for diabetics, but for athletes and biohackers. We have smart inhalers that track usage and environmental triggers for asthma. Wearable ECG patches that monitor your heart for weeks at a time.
And the players are the big medical device companies like Abbott and Medtronic, but also Apple.
Apple is the really interesting hybrid. It's a consumer device, the Apple Watch, that is increasingly becoming a clinical-grade tool. It can detect atrial fibrillation. It's getting better at tracking sleep apnea. It is completely blurring the line between a wellness gadget and a serious medical device.
The report made an interesting point about distribution, too. It's not just going to be Amazon dropping these on your doorstep.
No. Brick-and-mortar pharmacies are still vital. You can buy a device online, but you might need to go to a pharmacy to have a professional help you fit it or explain how to use the app or connect it to your doctor's office. The local pharmacist is becoming the tech support for the hospital at home.
So we have covered a huge amount of ground today. I mean, from the absolute fundamentals of protein folding with AlphaFold
To the sobering reality check of clinical performance and the none of the above failure.
to the battle of the models, the specialists beating the generalists, and the booming business landscape where the money is finally getting smart.
It's a really comprehensive ecosystem. You can't just look at one part.
So if we try to synthesize all of this, what is the big takeaway for our listener? Where are we really in February 2026?
I think the synthesis is this. The infrastructure is ready. We have the biology getting sorted with AlphaFold. We have models that are getting more specialized, more accurate and safer, like meds and Hippocratic. The money is flowing into...
The pieces are all there on the board.
They are, but the human element is now the bottleneck. The Stanford report was very, very clear about this. If doctors don't trust the AI, or worse, if they trust it too much and turn off their own critical thinking, the whole system fails.
It comes back to that human-AI teaming and avoiding the automation bias.
It does. The technology is almost there. The question is, are we as humans ready to work with it? Are we ready to be humble enough to admit that the machine might spot the pattern before we do, without losing our confidence to say no when the machine is wrong? That's the tightrope walk.
That leads me to a final provocative thought building on all this. We talked about digital CROs simulating biology so well that we can skip animal testing.
Right, the in silico trials.
If we get to a point where we can simulate a human clinical trial entirely in a computer with a high degree of accuracy, are we approaching a point where the clinical trial is just a data processing task?
It raises profound ethical and scientific questions. I mean, if the simulation is perfect, or near perfect, do we even need human subjects for a phase 1 trial? Do we need to risk real lives to test a drug if the digital twin is accurate enough to predict toxicity?
And on the consumer side, to flip it around, if I'm paying $40 cash for an AI diagnosis because I trust the machine's data more than the overburdened healthcare system, what does that do to the doctor-patient relationship in the long run?
It completely disintermediates the doctor. The doctor shifts from being the primary authority to being a consultant to the AI's findings. It changes the hierarchy of medicine that has existed for thousands of years. The patient and the AI become the primary relationship.
That is a wild, wild future to think about.
It is. But it's the future we are building right now with every new model and every new investment.
Well, on that note, I want to encourage you, the listener, to maybe look at the fine print the next time you are at the doctor's office. Is an AI listening to your visit? Is an algorithm reading your scan? It might be worth asking the question.
Awareness is always the first step.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We will catch you on the next one.